So a little introduction from myself. Everyone's thinking, who's this kid? So my name is Piers. I'm a registered paramedic in the UK, currently in the Northwest at the moment. I kicked off my career back in 2009, where I started as a paramedic on ambulances, as we all do, and quickly migrated over to RRVs, FRVs, or rapid response vehicles, whatever you want to call them in your area. And not too long after that, the opportunity for HART came up. I applied and managed to blag my way into there, and spent some time doing that. From there, an opportunity again. It was a funded opportunity to study as a physician associate came up, so I applied, and again somehow managed to convince them that I was good enough to do that. So did that for a couple of years, and then from there an opportunity for HEMS came about. I applied, and again managed to convince them that I was worth a chance. So and that's what I've been doing ever since then. And my most recent venture is that I've been studying as an Anaesthesia Associate. So I've got a little bit of experience in terms of roles that you can apply for. I can give you my experience on how to apply, as well as a good idea of the day-to-day operation of what each of those roles do, as well as a few other ones. So with that in mind, I know a few of you have been putting a few bits in the chat. I'm going to steer away from the chat for the time being and Q&As. Andy is going to let me know if there's any pertinent chat questions that come up, and he's going to just stop me mid-flow if that's the case. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is just to make this a little bit more interactive. Is going to go after that we'll go through this meme here and thinks, well, why have I come up with this presentation today? Well, perhaps when we apply for the ambulance service, you think, this is the dream job of mine. Certainly in my case, things perhaps weren't as glamorous as I expected, and I think it's still the best job in the world, and I'm so glad I did it. But there are other times you think, is there perhaps something more to this? And so that's why I've decided to do this presentation today. I love being called an ambulance driver just as much as nurses like being called doctor helpers. So without further ado, if you want to scan this QR code with your smartphones, if you're already on a smartphone already, then I'm not sure what you'll do, but give that little QR code a scan there, and then we'll just go through a few interactive questions, if I may. So with that in mind, we'll go on to here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this here. So lovely. So yeah, I've got a few places that we're coming from. I can see Manchester here, Derby in England, wonderful. All over the place. That's great. Okay, fine. And next question, what grade of clinician are you? Now, obviously, this was pitched to NQPs, but I know there are a few different people that have joined us today. Lovely. Student year 3, great to hear. Few techs in the group, wonderful. Specialist paramedics as well. Great. Finally. And then another question I have for you is, what roles are you keen to hear about today? And so a few responses I've got so far. So any critical care, yeah, no problem at all. TAC commander, specialist para. We can talk about that at the end if you remind me. HART and HEMS, yeah, AA, PA, crit care. Lovely. HART, Coast Guard, yeah, no problem. Ask and you shall receive. All right. So without further ado, ACPs. Yeah, no problem. Right, we've got you covered. So let's go back to the presentation. So first one I wanted to talk about today, and most of the pictures that I've included in this presentation, I do know of these people, and I've gone out of my way to embarrass those people. So including our colleague at the bottom there. who's having the time of her life. So the first role I wanted to talk about was the physician associate. And so how they have come about is Health Education England are having a big push of what we call the associate professions. There are 4 of them, which are the physician associate, the anaesthetic associate, the surgical care practitioner, and the advanced critical care practitioner. All 4 of those are due to be registered with the GMC, or certainly the anaesthetic associate and the physician associates are certainly. The other 2 roles at the moment are reliant on people having previous registration elsewhere, for example, HCPC or NMC. When a non-medical person asks me, well, what are they? Is they not just an advanced practitioner? What is the difference? Now, in America, anaesthetic associates and what they call anaesthetic assistants over there, as well as physician's assistants, have existed for quite a long time. In fact, if not longer than paramedics have in the UK. They've done very, very well over there. And the best way I can describe it is if you would imagine that in the UK, let's say you have a nurse who has a good, sound medical knowledge, but to become an advanced practitioner, they would require a little bit more deeper, in-depth scientific knowledge to get them up to that master's level, to get them to that level of a mid-level doctor and support that rota. This would be the opposite direction with physician associates. So in other words, what tends to happen is that people will apply directly to a university, for example, UCLan that you can see on the screen here. The vast majority of applicants will come from a biomed background or a biochem background, and what they're looking for is that they've got their scientific knowledge. What they're looking for is that medical conversion. That being said, it is not off limits to people who are medical staff already, paramedics, nurses. As long as you have a healthcare or some sort of scientific degree, you are eligible to apply. Most NHS trusts have physician associates now working across their range of medical wards. So that could be anything from A&E to ward work, acute medical wards. Similarly, Health Education England do have a big push on physician associates moving into GP practice as well. Typically, upon qualification, you're looking at starting about a band 7. As I've mentioned, they are looking to be regulated by the end of 2024. That will be with the GMC. With that in mind, once they have been registered, you then hopefully they're able to then prescribe, to order X-rays, as well as obviously have more responsibility. Right now, they're working under direct supervision, defined direct, but direct supervision of a medical doctor at the moment. Training wise, what do we need to do? Well, it's an application directly to a university. Most universities now, I'm afraid, they are asking you to pay your university fees. You typically won't find physician associates being funded at the moment, but obviously that is subject to change. Typically, the qualification is a master's degree. This is an old poster that you can see here. This is actually from about 2 or 3 years ago, but again, essentially it's mirroring what I've just said. Band 7 typically, it lasts around 2 years worth of training. Most physician associates won't be doing nights or weekends because again, they need to be working under direct supervision from a doctor. So there's no point in them being on call. So I've just pinched this bit from Manchester University where it said applicants should have an upper second class or another as a 2-1 in biomed, biochemistry, A&P, or any other healthcare science. So that does include paramedic sciences, midwifery, nursing rather, etc. That being said, if you're a doctor, you can't apply. I'm not sure why you'd want to. Interestingly, since I did this, they're now looking to include the UKCAT. That's the University Clinical Aptitude Test, which is the same thing that is used for the vast majority of medical schools as part of the application process. I won't touch or go too much onto that. But again, it's something you can go and have a look at. Really, it's not too difficult, and you can practice in your own time. Plenty of apps available. So moving on. Again, if anybody has any questions about the physician associate, again, do let me know. But without further ado, next is the anaesthetic associate. So formerly known as the physician assistant in anaesthesia, or PAA. Now known as the anaesthetic associate, again under the umbrella of HAE, pushing the 4 associate professions. Now, this is slightly different. This role is generally posted on NHS jobs, and so in other words, you would come into the trust as an employee. You are paid a particular wage. For example, locally to me, Manchester Foundation Trust, they pay band 6 as a trainee for 2 years. Upon qualification, it's a band 7, and then with portfolio development, you're looking at higher bands from there. Conversely, other trusts may look to pay you a nominated training salary, such as Salford, again in my local area. Again, more and more of these roles are coming about at the moment. I've certainly in the Northwest, there's a big push for those. London has a large cohort of AAs being trained at the moment. Again, same as physician associates, it's a 2-year master's course. Originally, this was just Birmingham University, but now other universities have got involved, including University College London, so UCL, and University of Lancaster up in the north. Again, both conforming to the Royal College of Anaesthetists training standards that's been set out. Similar to the physician associates, looking to be registered by 2024 with the GMC. And again, after that, hopefully once they're registered, it means that they can look to gain prescribing rights, X-ray capabilities, that sort of thing, really. So, and of course, with regulation becomes the ability to become more and more responsible. So anaesthetic associates, just to go a little bit into the of what they do and how they work. So essentially, your typical day will include what we call pre-opping a patient. So that will include interviewing the patient, having read their notes prior to meeting them, and basically discussing with them what anaesthesia is, what risks are involved with the anaesthesia, and consenting them to that. It's as an AA, it's your opportunity to decide whether the patient is fit for anaesthesia, as well as look for hallmarks of difficult airways, take a full medical history, that sort of thing. The next thing you know, you'll see the patient in the anaesthetic room, where again you'll gain all the access that you need, whether it's peripheral cannula, arterial lines, and then administer anaesthesia. That could either be via general anaesthetic, which will either be a combination of drugs as well as anaesthetic gases, or it might be spinal. So in which case it will be, like I say, a spinal anaesthetic, which is different from an epidural. What else can I tell you about them? So the other abilities that they have, so central venous access, pretty skilled with ultrasound as well. And again, of course, their main responsibilities is maintenance of anaesthesia, as well as waking the patient up at the end. For the Health Education England, much like physician associates, where they have intentions for them to be working either in A&E, in wards, or in GP land, the anaesthetic associates really are being pushed towards working with the day case. surgeries, so what we call a low ASA grade of patients. Nice, fit and healthy patients have come in for elective surgeries. The intended outcome will be that the AAs are working in a 2-to-1 fashion with a consultant, so, or even a 3-to-1 in some cases. So in other words, 2 to 3 operations running under the supervision of one consultant, which of course saves time and money. So if you have any further questions about that, let me know. But again, it's a 2-year master's, and like I say, it's slightly different from the physician associate in that you are actually an employee with this one, and you're paid to train. So moving on. Of course, I've forgotten about this slide here. So yeah, again, typically they want biomed or biochem graduates, or of course healthcare practitioners, paramedics, nurses, ODPs, etc. It's good if you've got an ALS certificate, and as well as all the usual soft skills, including good communication, self-motivation, good if you're a mentor in the past, and of course your ability to demonstrate your previous CPD as well. So if you want any more information on that, the NHS Jobs has got a few AA jobs out at the moment, as well as again the University College London and University of Lancaster websites are good for getting a bit more information about the role there. HART. So if you decide, actually, no, I do want to stay in the ambulance service, I don't really want to, work in a hospital, I want to be outside, I'm quite outdoorsy, then maybe HART is something for you. I've heard various acronyms for what HART stands for, including Hazardous Area Response Team, the Holiday and Retirement Team, Have Another Round of Toast, you name it, I've heard it. And they get better and better as time goes on, but they are busier than you think. Of the 10 ambulance trusts across the country, all of them have at least one HART team. I know NWAS, SWAST, and London definitely have 2 HART bases across their trusts. Again, it's all down to what the risk assessment has come of it. Where have they come from? Well, of course, back quite some time ago now, and I'm trying to think what year it will have been. It was certainly pre-2010, but there was an exercise at the then disused Bank Underground station where a mass casualty exercise was performed. The then Home Secretary was in attendance and noted that there weren't any medical staff within the hot zone of the incident, and asked, well, why isn't anybody in there? Why is anybody treating the casualties? So the answer was, well, they don't have the PPE, they don't have the training, it's only the police and of course the fire and rescue service that do. So with that in mind, the idea of HART was created. Fast forward a few months to a year or so, unfortunately the 7/7 bombings happened, and that the role was certainly fast tracked from there, and now we have HART. In Scotland it's called SORT, whereas in England HART is supported by a SORT team. So capabilities then. So we have their initial, what we call IRU, so incident response unit, and typically a HART team will consist of 6 people, one of which is a team leader. That being said, nationally, post Arena, Manchester Arena inquiry, most teams are looking to expand to teams of 7. So typical capabilities then. So is the treatment as well as extrication of casualties within the hot zone and warm zones of a major incident. Stakeholders all point out as well that the HART are contracted, or should we say they're funded, to be able to respond to a CBRNE attack within 30 minutes of it actually happening. It may be 20, I think it's 30. Anyway, so their main capabilities, as I say, is, for example, USAR, so urban search and rescue, swift water rescue as well, safe working at height, confined space, as well as, again, working within any CBRN, so chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and any form of explosive incident as well. So they have the PPE and as well as the training in order to do that. They work very, very closely with the fire and rescue service as well as the police in order to do that. Of course, what are they doing when there's none of those incidents happening? More than you'd think, to be fair. So quite often they'll work on police special operations, for example, drug raids, counter-terrorism, etc. Some things that they can't even tell you about, to be honest. Similarly, a training week is at least every 7 weeks, so a full week of training every 7 weeks, certainly within NWAS anyway. It may be more in other places. Again, and taking part in mass casualty exercises as well. The training is quite tough. It's based down at NARU, which is the National Ambulance Resilience Unit, down at Winterbourne Gunner. Its initial course is 4 weeks long, plus a 2-week breathing apparatus course. And then, of course, then the training in other specialties. For it's a week to train as an SRT, so Swift Rescue Technician. It's a good week to, again, train doing things at height as well. So yes, not for the faint-hearted, and certainly if you're not a fan of heights, or perhaps working in tight enclosed spaces, it might not be for you. But otherwise, it is a fun gig, and certainly what I liked about it was that you tend to work with the same team all the time. And in terms of from a CRM or a crew resource management perspective, those who are familiar with that, in other words, where everybody, there's a flattened hierarchy within a team, everybody knows what each other's role is, and everyone has the ability to raise their hand and say, oh, there's an issue here, without fear of it being a problem. So from a CRM perspective, it's a great gig to work in, I must say. Typically a HART operative will be a band 6, team leaders a band 7, I believe. I know a few HART teams have specialist paramedics in there as well, with extra capabilities. In terms of anything that HART paramedics may have on top of our colleagues on ambulances, some trusts do provide their HART paramedics with extended scope of practice, an extended scope of drugs, but again, it does differ from trust to trust. So I think that's all I've got to say about those. I just did lift this from a recent, I think, where is this from? I think it might be Yorkshire or one of the others, but who are currently advertising for HART paramedics. But typically they will want 3 years full-time post-qualification. That seems to be the average at the moment. Some HART teams, they want 2 years post-NQP. Some people take the NQP as your 2 years plus another one. It really does differ from trust to trust. Again, having an ALS certificate, PHTLS certificate is useful to have. There were certainly 2 certificates I think are reasonably easy to get myself, and relatively inexpensive. Interestingly, on the NARU website, they do actually give you the questions that you would be asked in an interview. Now, each trust is welcome to add their own questions on top of it, so don't be fooled that this is all you would have to prepare for, but certainly, as you can see there, on the OP or operative side, you'd be asked about, for example, team orientation development. Tell us about a time where you've had to work as a team, or don't be surprised if it's spun, on its head and say, tell us about a time when there's a lack of teamwork, and so you'd have to come up with something for that. So have a little look on the NARU website. It's a really good website and quite easy to navigate. Quite a few of you will be interested in HEMS, I would imagine. So critical care, as we're starting to refer it to. So we're certainly within the UK, there are 21 HEMS charities currently across the UK. Now, I emphasise the word charity. All of the air ambulance units are charitable funded. In other words, they are purely rely on people's donations, essentially. And so one of the key responsibilities of being a HEMS paramedic or a critical care paramedic, whichever role that you are recruited into, if and when you apply to a HEMS unit, is being an ambassador for the charity, getting involved in fundraising, posing for TikToks and all that sort of thing. And I can tell you now, they always get you when you least expect it. You've just come back from the worst job of your life, and they'll always get you. So, can we have a photo? And the sweat's dripping down your face and your hair's all skew-if, and you think, okay, go on then. But most, dare I say it, most HEMS charities work in collaboration with their local NHS ambulance trust. So, for example, Yorkshire Air Ambulance, Northwest Air Ambulance, they work in collaboration with YAS, with NWAS. And so they will recruit internally only from the trust. Yorkshire, for example, you'll be seconded into the air ambulance for 3 years. Within NWAS, you are on permanent loan per se. You are permanently cited within the Northwest Air Ambulance charity. Again, it differs from place to place, and certainly, let's say, for example, London, you get 1 year at it. To the best of my knowledge, it might be a little bit longer than that, but you get 1 year and then you're back out on the road. So conversely, other charities, for example, what we call TAS, or the Air Ambulance Service, as well as Midlands, they have gone their own way. So in other words, they are or Links and Knots, for example, as well. They are a private entity. They are CQC registered, and essentially you would go there again as a private employee. They employ their own paramedics, and pilots, etc., etc. So very different depending on where you're living and working. The only exception to that rule is Wales, and I dare say Hampshire and Isle of Wight. Their clinicians are employed by the local hospital trust, which is fantastic because it means that they get to rotate in and out of hospital. If they need a day doing tubes in theatres, they can do it. If they need a day working in A&E because they want to practice their ultrasound, they can do it. It's a fantastic opportunity that the Welsh EMERTs have, as well as Hampshire and Isle of Wight. But again, typical day in the life, really. So you'll start, most air ambulance charities are daytime only. Some of them do have night ops. But again, you'll start nice and early in the morning, getting the aircraft ready. You are trained as what we call a technical crew member. So you are part of the crew. Your life as a paramedic on an air ambulance will flick between being aviation and back to medical, and sometimes doing a bit of both. So first thing in the morning, you're checking your medical stuff, but then you're also helping the captain check the aircraft as well, and you revert into aviation mode. If and when you get a call on the day, again, you're in aviation mode. You're helping plan the navigation to the actual incident itself, as well as discussing weather and any other aviation factors that may come about as part of that mission. Pre-takeoff checks, aviation mode. Once you land at the site, again, which you again help the captain recce the site, again, aviation mode. Then all of a sudden, bang, you're back into medical mode, and you're expected to work to a very, very high capability. Typically, HEMS paramedics or critical care paramedics, specialist paramedics in critical care, whatever role that particular charity has decided to take on, will be trained to at least a PG cert level in critical care. A common place to go for that is Warwick, or one of the ones down is at Queen Mary. I think they do one. Bangor University, as well as Cardiff University, also they do critical care PG certs. Other places push you towards a PG dip or even the full masters in the case of Wales. Again, so you're expected to work to a very high capability. You may be part of a double CCP crew. You might be working with a doctor that day. It really depends. Again, you're in medical mode. Then you decide, okay, we'd like to lift this casualty to hospital, in which case you'll need to interact with the captain again. You're discussing aviation things whilst considering medical, and then of course you've got to do a little bit of juggling act whilst taking them to hospital mid-air, sort of concentrating on what's going on with the patient, looking at the obs, looking at the patient. And let me tell you, that's EC 135 in the background there. They are very, very tight to work in. If you've ever wondered why HEMS teams take a fair amount of time on scene, it's because everything needs to be done before getting in the into the aircraft. Trying to put a cannula in upside down whilst in a cramped cabin is not the one, especially during turbulence as well. The vast majority of patients, I'd say, are taken by road. It's much safer to do it that way, and you can have a lot more control. But if it is an extended time to hospital, they will be airlifted. So yeah, I'd say the vast majority of HEMS paramedics are either on band 6 or band 7. Again, EMERTs have a few nurses working on board as well, but typical capability, so extended range of skills, including front of neck access, surgical thoracostomies, or finger thoracostomies as we call it, extended scope of drugs, for example, ketamine, midazolam, flumazenil, and in some cases, paramedics are also administering blood products as well. In England, blood products are not prescription-only medicine, so they can be administered, whereas in Wales they are, and so they have to be prescribed, which is interesting. So yeah, generally at least PG Cert qualified. When applying to a HEMS unit, I would say have a good idea of what CRM is, or crew resource management. There are plenty of articles out there on Google Scholar and in Google in general about the relationship between aviation world and medical world as well. How we work together to reach a common goal. Work on your communication skills for sure, and of course come to them with a decent set of qualifications. I say ALS and PH2S as a minimum. Some people do like, also some charities like you to have the what we call the DIP IMC, or Diploma in Intermediate Care. That's by the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. It's not cheap. It's about £1,000, but it looks really good on your CV. Any more questions? Again, just let me know. So I realise I'm pushing for time here, so we'll rattle through the last few. So cruise ships, interestingly, it's not something that I've looked at before until I was making this presentation, really, but I have met a few people who have worked as paramedics on cruise ships. The vast majority of cruise liners, or rather cruise companies, for example, P&O Australia, I would say Princess Cruises, amongst all the different brands, most of them are owned by a brand called Carnival Cruise, which you can apply directly to or via an agency. Interestingly, if you were to work as a paramedic on a cruise ship, typically, in fact, I'll go through what you need afterwards, but you do come in as officer status. So it's 3-stripe status, which means you do have a lot more privileges than a lot of the other people that are working on the cruise ship, including having your own cabin with windows, which is nice, as well as housekeeping, debt privileges, and obviously the most important thing is that it's tax-free salary because it's offshore. So typically, I would, in terms of salary, I would put it at about the top of band 6 in terms of equivalent salaries there. One thing to note: nurses, they do outrank paramedics on cruise ships. Interesting to know. But typical day in the life, really, you could be working within the clinic there alongside the nurses and doctors. But the vast majority of the time, paramedics are spent on call, responding to any incidents that happen on the cruise ship. Depending on the cruise ship that you're on, it could be, let's say, for example, you're on Saga Cruises. Obviously, you are going to be working with more elderly people who come with, with common ailments. Conversely, if you're on the party ships, you're going to have a slightly different clientele, shall we say. So typically they'll want an ALS certificate from you as well. Are you detecting a theme here? 3 years post grad, for which I do believe NQP would class as 2 years of that. Working in a clinical setting, again, ambulance work is included in that. It helps if you've had a little bit of experience rotating around hospitals, but again, it's how you put it on your CV, isn't it? And then other than that, I would say the main thing that they're looking for is excellent customer service. Something to bear in mind with cruise ships is that it is yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. It's you're no longer in an environment where it's, well, you know, we're not here for you to be drunk, or we're not here to pick you up off the floor. You will absolutely be picking up everybody off the floor and saying, was that okay for you, sir? So it's you all of a sudden you're working in the private sector and people are paying a pretty penny for you. So essentially expect to be giving outstanding interpersonal skills, customer service, and communication skills as well. Offshore. So admittedly not my forte in terms of I've not actually met anybody who's done offshore. That being said, I do know one of the tutors who trains a lot of offshore medics, but essentially again, typically remote medics or offshore medics, they're not necessarily paramedics at all. They can be nurses, and they can also be non-registered healthcare professionals, as long as they have what we call the HSE or the Health and Safety Executive Offshore Medic course. Pretty expensive. Last time I checked, it's around the £2,500 mark. It might even be more now, but essentially anybody with that qualification can do it. There are a few other qualifications that you do have to have, that they like you to have, including having a particular type of medical that you need to work offshore, as well as NEBOSH qualifications, which essentially is health and safety, as well as health and safety at work qualifications, as well as other various little qualifications, which we'll go through in a minute. Essentially, abilities wise, all the things that you can do as a paramedic. If you've done HART, you stand a fantastic chance of bagging one of these jobs as well, because the vast majority of the extra qualifications that they want, including safe working at height, water rescue, confined space working, all those qualifications that you developed at HART are actually directly translatable to an offshore medic. And hence I've known a few HART team members go to offshore, again, to earn a tax-free salary. So other abilities that get taught on the HSE offshore medic qualification include wound closure, suturing, as well as catheterization, again, surgical thoracostomy and front of neck access as well. Other than that, you are reasonably, you're on your own essentially, but you do have good backup remotely via the telephone to a doctor who's onshore. So in terms of the things that you might need there, so again, offshore medic course there. There's a couple of offshore medical certificates that you need that are by the Oil and Energies UK. As well as MIST training, or minimum industry safety training, and essentially what we call a class 1 medical. CRB as well. So there are some very, very technical things and very specific things, qualifications that you need on there. That being said, they're reasonably easy to find. Most places, there's a lot of places that do them across the country. It's just down to you to invest in them, and essentially you're looking at the best part of £3,000 to £4,000 worth of qualifications there on top of your paramedic experience, but you'll make the money back. And then finally, there's a few other bits and bobs that I just wanted to talk about, and then I'll bring it to a close. So top left-hand corner there, so Festival Medical Services, they're based at Glastonbury. So that is a voluntary organisation there. Most people that people apply to. Last time I checked, there was a pretty big waiting line to work for Festival Medical Services. But essentially, you can do private work. There's plenty of private companies that work across the country, certainly in the Northwest Medical Solutions, there's Mersey Medical, amongst various others that you can do plenty of gig work through. I wouldn't recommend personally doing that full time, because employers really do value NHS frontline experience, no matter how sometimes mundane it can be. They really do value it. So I personally recommend that one as a little side gig, as a pocket money sort of thing. But typically, if you are a qualified paramedic, they are absolutely desperate to have you on their books. In terms of the winch paramedic there, so the Coast Guard, certainly in the UK, the contract is held by Bristow Helicopters. It's an American company based in Texas, I believe, and but their UKCAT contract is held by them. They're working out of Augusta helicopters. I think it's 139s, might be the 169, and as well as the mighty Sikorsky S-92, which is an absolutely massive helicopter, and it has air conditioning, which is nice. Essentially, a couple of years ago, it might even have been late to early last year, I think, Bristow held a cadetship for winch paramedics. I would imagine that they may come up with another recruitment drive within the next year to two. Currently, they're recruiting for SAR or winch paramedics at the moment. Those who I would imagine who have qualified already with Bristow under the cadetship, as well as ex-military as well. But essentially, a typical day in the life at most of the bases are, as the name suggests, are based coastally. For example, up in the north, we have Carnarvon in Wales. We have Hull as well. There's Sunburg up in the Shetland Isles, and there's a fair few down south as well. But typical day in the life will include a lot of training, a lot of, again, aviation prep. And then, of course, you as the paramedic are responsible for the maintenance of all the medical kit, making sure things are in date, things are audited correctly, as well as maintaining your own CPD. They go to a lot more things than you think, including walkers up in the hills, as well as things that are offshore or even coastal. Yes, so that's your winch paramedic there. Again, typically, I think on the last look, they were looking for paramedics with at least 2 years post qualification experience on there. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's a picture I pinched off Google actually, from an expedition company that I've had some conversations with. That they're in Nepal there at the moment, but essentially, expedition medics, they a lot of expeditions now are not just what you'd think in terms of taking clientele, on an expedition. Quite often, expedition companies are wanting medical staff to help with remote TV filming or film, as in filming the movies. Certainly, a colleague of mine has just been out with a expedition company to go and do some filming in the Arctic part of Norway. Similarly, another colleague of mine who's on HEMS, she's just done again another tour with an expedition company out again in Nepal, and before that in the jungles of Borneo. So they really are all over the world. Typically, it's really difficult to get your foot in the door of ex-med. It's by referral only. It's certainly, in this case, it's who you know, not what you know. But again, an ALS certificate is useful, PHTLS, as well as expedition medical certificates, for example, those by World Extreme Medicine, or WEM. There's another one called WEMZ. So that there are a few expedition medical qualifications specifically that you can get. Similarly, I know UCLan, or University of Central Lancaster, they do a PG Dip or Masters in mountain/wilderness medicine. Worth a look if you're interested. It's a really well thought of course, and all of the doctors that teach on it, again, are expedition medic doctors as well. All of it is taught online, but then they have 3 times a year, they'll have though we actually go out on expeditions. It's a very, very practical course that you go on. Standard uni fees, but you gain a lot out of it. Very, very much like an MRT or mountain rescue sort of course, but medically orientated. And of course, how can I forget advanced practice? I won't go labour too much onto it, but again, plenty of trainee advanced practitioner roles out there on NHS jobs at the moment. Typically 2-year masters employed directly by an NHS trust, typically at band 7 whilst you're a trainee, and an 8A upon qualification. Of course, now paramedics have prescribing rights, so they love that now. A lot more paramedics are going into that, whereas before it was pretty much isolated to nurses, again, because of the prescribing rights. Typical places that you might find them: GP practice, A&E, but more and more often, you do see them again working in ward work as well as critical care as well, as per the ACCP role. I'm sure you've heard plenty about advanced practitioners. And again, it is a fantastic qualification, the Masters in Advanced Clinical Practice. And certainly, I certainly found that when studying a few of the modules on there, I realised that actually I didn't really know that much at all, and it was certainly a big learning curve. So with that in mind, if there's any questions, please do put them in the chat. Let's see, what pathway would you, in your opinion, would be good for a paramedic in disaster management MSc? Yeah, good question. Disaster management. So I would imagine you're going to answer this question live, apparently. I would say emergency planning, EPRR, but again, we'll come back to that. There are many online courses that claim accreditation for certain requisite qualifications for working across cruise ships. Variety of costs. Are there any that are more credible than others? Yeah, I would definitely say for the cruise ship stuff, just stick to the ALS, so Advanced Life Support, and Resus Council UK, anything on that particular website where you can go through. And what do you need to work in a GP surgery? Again, GP surgery, paramedics are either employed as first contact practitioners or advanced practitioners. But again, we can answer that question live.